Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisen, host of Inside Personal Growth. And Corey, as I do every time I come on these shows, I thank the listeners because, I've been doing this 13 years, 800 and almost 50 podcasts. A lot of authors have come and gone, as they say. And it's always nice to meet a new author and somebody with a message that I think is going to resonate with just tons of people. And we're on with Corey McComb, and his new book that will be out, by the time this is aired, is called Productivity is for Robots, right?
That's the one.
Okay. And Corey is joining us from La Jolla, California. Just came back to San Diego. Glad to have you back here, Corey. And he was introduced to me by Mark Pacorda. And Mark is a really good friend who wrote a book really about his company called Launch Boom. And for all you who are out there, highly recommend you going back and listening to that podcast with Mark. Really, really bright guy. Good day to you, Corey. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Greg. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on because number one, you come from a referral source, which is just, he's an awesome guy.
Mark's the
And
man.
he is the man. If somebody's going to raise money for a brand new product, Mark is the guy.
Yes.
But I'm going to let people know just a tad bit about you, if you don't mind. Corey McComb is a writer based in San Diego, actually La Jolla. He says after being kidnapped by a rock and roll circus at the age of 16, he was forced to strum his way across the country and back again. Then he toiled as a peon in a parking garage and speedy telemarketing pits until becoming the international man of mystery. In search of a free concert ticket, he moved to musician journalism and began a steamy love affair with the blank page. Corey now helps people and companies validate ideas, tell their stories, and launch products. His own writing focuses on the sweet spot in life where human connection, creativity, and personal growth intersect. Through blog posts, essays, and occasional short stories, Corey examines the human condition and new ways of thinking. If you really want to learn more about Corey, go to Corey, C-O-R-E-Y, McComb, MCCOMB.com. And there you can go to his website. It's got a newsletter, courses, blog. You can learn more about the book there. Productivity is for Robots, and learn more and actually get one of the chapters from the book as well. And Corey, pleasure having you here. And this topic is timely. It's timeless. It's really what I want to say. It's timeless. It's not timely. The reality is, but it's more timely because of COVID. And I think people today kind of reevaluating their lives. COVID has done, if it's done one thing, it's helped people slow down and think. And I don't have a copy of the book to hold up, but I don't know if you've got anything in your hands, but normally we hold up the copy of the book. But I'm just going to tell you, beautiful book jacket design, well written by somebody who knows how to write. And in the introduction to the book, you paint a picture of a guy that was really lost sight of what was important. It was if you personally were chasing what you believe the rest of the world thought was important. And, there's a lot of people out there that do that for a very long time until they wake up and find themselves. You were anxious. You were feeling as if whatever you did, it wasn't enough. And that is a proverbial story in society, is not being enough. What advice would you give the listeners that are feeling like that and they're running a marathon, but the marathon seems like there's no end to it because it's just like, hey, it's 26.2 miles. I thought this thing was going to end and I could take a break, but I'm not. What advice do you have?
Exactly. Well, thanks for the introduction, Greg. I really appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm really glad that you were able to connect timely to timeless, because that was certainly my goal. Most of the book was written before COVID really hit. I was more just like editing this year. And what I wanted to do was write something that was connected to the present moment as we kind of have, as technology grows and becomes a bigger, faster, stronger part of our lives, we're able to lean into our humanity more and more, though we do it less and less. And trying to kind of connect that to the present moment while at the same time introducing these lessons that can really be timeless. And that's what I wanted to do. That's what I set out to do. So thank you for recognizing that.
Well, you did a great job. And, you know, your personal story is weaved throughout this along with a lot of other stories. And I think much of your story had tremendous amounts of personal pain in it up to that point. Your journal entries that you write in the book that you kind of start a lot of the chapters with, where, you know, there's a journal entry there. What advice do you have for people that are in that kind of pain?
Yeah, that feeling where you're waking up and it's just never enough. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people, and I think that I almost started to believe this when I started writing the book, is like, it's not really so much the amount of work. If you feel like you're on a marathon, one of the big central messages here is that you don't want to confuse movement with meaning. And I think that's what happens a lot in society when we get caught up in this feeling that, you know, we're a generation and we have so much more ambition. There's so many more ways to be ambitious. And what I found growing up, you know, over the last 10 years with Tony Robbins and self-help and this optimization movement, and there's so much good in it, but it can also leave you feeling like if you're not capitalizing on your success, if you're not squeezing out every last bit of focus, if you're not scaling your time in all these different areas, that you're somehow falling behind. And I think that when we feel that energy coming from the world that is saying that you need to be doing more, if you're not growing, you're dying, and all these things, that it can be really easy to latch onto some of that and just start finding things to do. And as you find more and more things to do, as you start running that marathon, if you're not doing things that are in alignment with your true purpose, or you haven't taken that step back to really realize, you know, ask yourself the question, what am I doing and why? That's when it starts to feel like a marathon. You know, it's not so much that you need to do less. It's often that you're just doing, you're building a moat around the thing. You're building like a moat of tasks around the thing that is actually keeping you from doing like what you should be doing in the first place. It's collecting the static on the line, as I write about. So
yeah, and I think as human beings, though, as the human condition, as we are designed, you know, we come out of our mother's womb and we grow up as children. We get conditioned. The conditioning leads to us of falling into patterns. We are a species that likes to do things, right? And it's so hard for people to slow down. And you state that in our ongoing quest to become limitless beings, we've shifted those envious eyes away from the gods and towards something more quantifiable. And you say output, right? That's what we're talking about here is, okay, you know, what did you do for me today? Did you do enough today? Why is chasing the elusive output and productivity we seek as the never-ending battle? Because, you know, I'm quite a bit older than you, okay? And I've been at this, I'm going to call it this game, because, you know, it's like we're players on a stage and we're in different acts of the play. We're in different acts of life. And it seems people kind of at your age, even when I was your age, we fall into all of those things about what the world is. It's almost like it's seductive. Like, oh, let's have more, let's be more, let's get the sorry Tesla, but let's get the Tesla and let's have this and that and whatever. So how would you balance this thing between output productivity and kind of the never-ending battle with it?
yeah, you know, there's a line in the book that goes, busyness is just laziness with a collared shirt.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it's something that I kind of fell into, where it's a lot easier to say I'm too busy than I'm scared and I don't know where to start. And I spent a year really using busyness just as a proverbial stiff arm to keep the things away that I know that I really wanted to do. It's like, like the packed schedule is just the sacrificial lamb in a lot of ways. And it's so easy to fall into that. Um, I think that you balance it out really by taking that step back and asking yourself, like, how is this making me feel? And it's not about like what are you doing? It's more about like, what are you not doing? Because the feeling of being on a never-ending treadmill, like you're not doing enough, doing more and more, it might sound like you need to do less, but chances are, at least for me, it's not about doing less. It's like the things that I'm doing are stopping me from doing something that is actually going to make me feel fulfilled. you
Mm-hmm.
know and we're so hungry for the productivity hacks, the whether it's speed reading or smart pills, or I think that there's this belief that when you look at really successful people, like we'll use Elon Musk because you brought up Tesla, and
Right.
like the Elon Musk and the Steve Jobs of the world. I think it's really easy to see like, oh, these guys are working so hard, they're just crushing and grinding and hustling, and I need to be doing that much. But I think that people they underestimate the energy that you get when what you're doing is really aligned with a greater sense of like purpose and meaning.
Right.
They assume that these people must be like on Adderall or drugs, or they're just like never sleeping, because they seem like they're doing so much output. And what these people have found more or less is something, it's not just busy work to them, like they're living their purpose. Like you get like an intrinsic human energy, you step into this human flow when your productivity is aligned with your purpose. It doesn't lead to this burnout, it doesn't lead to this stress and overwhelm. And I know that you talk about this in your book a lot, as well, Hacking the Gap, that stress and worry, like that is kryptonite to the productive person.
Mm-hmm.
And when we just keep going along and we're trying to keep up with these other people, thinking that movement is meaning, and it actually takes us further away, it drowns out the true calling, and it leads to stress and overwhelm, because we're running on this wheel. And it's like the more you get done, the more it feels like there is to do.
Yeah, well, the whole concept around purpose. I used to teach a course in the on purpose person, you know,
Mm.
and and I would have to say that I've chased purpose as well. I think the question might be for you is having someone find the purpose, um, or the purpose finding them
Mhm.
might even be better.
Mhm.
Because, I think there's a lot of people out there that go through a large part of their life never having even realized what their purpose is, right? Although we all have a purpose. And if we stop for just a moment and we contemplate our doingness, you know, we realize that we're most of the time hiding something that the soul is looking for, that the soul is calling to us. I think that's probably just as important. I'm rereading this book called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, something you may have read. But, if I said to you tomorrow morning, if there was someone that came down from the heavens and said, "Hey, Corey, this is your last day. Tomorrow morning's it. It's over." Finitude has something that finitude has something to actually tell people, that there's no greater lesson in life than death.
Mhm.
No greater lesson in life than death. Because we all make the assumption we're going to be here forever,
Yes.
right? And that's a pretty insane assumption, because if there's one thing that equalizes all people, right? And you'd agree with it, no matter how much money that, Elon Musk has, or This person has money, isn't it? Wealth, isn't it? Stature, isn't it? None of that is it. There's one thing, and that is the fact that we will all perish at some point. We're not going to be here. So with that, you state that in your book about the delicate art of urgent goal of staying human, a life where all endeavors flow into this united stream of connection, creativity, and purpose, what we were just talking about. In your estimation, what is it that we need to most likely unlearn or rethink about how we're living our lives? This is a real pivotal point, not only for your book, but for our listeners. What is it that we need to rethink or unlearn about how we're living our lives?
I love that you use the word unlearn, because that really is what so much of it is. I say in the book that, humans aren't robots, but we are programmable, and it's so important to unlearn and really first disconnect from some of the stories and the beliefs that we've built up about success and wealth building and a lot of those things you just mentioned. I think like the real tangible takeaway of what we need to reconsider, if I had to sum it up into a short sentence, would be to not try and forget about trying to be efficient and try and be effective. And we already have machines and robots that can work 100 hours plus, that have algorithms that can predict certain things. And as humans, what we really need to do is lean into our human nature and do what no one else can do or nothing else can do, which is like be creative. That's a real cornerstone in the book, is about being creative. What we need to unlearn or rethink is that in this new world, it's not the most productive that thrives. It's really the most creative and the most connected. So I think that the whole book is really an invitation to think and rethink about the way we approach work, approach our lives, approach our goals, and leaning into the human nature. And we can just dive deeper on some of those topics. But I think that that's probably like the biggest one is forget about efficiency, forget about trying to outwork and outgrind and out hustle, and lean into the human nature. And we need time. Art's not efficient. Friendship's not efficient. Relationships aren't efficient. Sitting and wondering and imagining the next big breakthrough, that's going to come from the imagination. And you're not going to have your best ideas when you're in a hurry.
Right.
If you've got a ton of worry and stress and you're just completely laser focused on the productivity, and obviously there's a place for that, right? There's a place for like deep work and extreme focus. And, this is kind of going back to what you were saying about finding your purpose, is that, inspiration follows action. You can't just sit around waiting for your purpose to just fall out of the sky and hit you on the head. I mean, it's going to happen from like doing things, but you're not going to have your best ideas when you're stressed out or in a hurry or like tunnel visioned on something. And as humans, if we want to get the most out of our time in this new world and really be, quote unquote, productive, it's going to come from creativity. It's going to come from, letting your mind relax and wander and actually loosening your grip of focus instead of tightening it.
Yeah. And, you talk about that in the book, and I used a term, I said in my book, and I'm sure you read it, but I said like fine tuning the channel. Now, in your case, you use a thing called static, and to be able to fine tune, to hear, to listen to the subtleties, you're being actually guided much of your life, depending on whether or not you believe in a higher purpose or a higher power, I should say, or not. There are signs and symbols. There are things that are happening. If you're listening to your body, if you're listening to the outside world talking to you, and you say, when life brings us opportunity, but we are so hyper-focused and plugged into life with tunnel vision productivity, right? You state we collect static on the line. How would you advise the listeners to clear the static on the line so that they can reconnect with what's important? Now, here's the point. If the static is so loud and you can't fine tune the channel, you're never going to hear the calling.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
you're just not going to hear it. And I think much of the world today is the static is prolific. It's everywhere because everybody's trying to capture your attention. Everybody's using social media. Everybody wants to do a podcast. Everybody's got something else, right? That they go, because look, you were a marketing guy, and that marketers call it the hook. So, if we can keep getting the hook in and keep people climbing the hook, I was watching David Letterman, and I'm going to sidestep here for a second, interview Kim Kardashian. Okay. This is on that new show on Netflix. She's got the big beard and the whole thing.
Right.
And, she's saying stuff like, well, I can put a tweet up about Carl's Jr. and I can have 5 million hits in 2 minutes or something like that, right? Whatever the heck it is. And it's like, wow, is this what the world's come to? Is it? And so to me, that's static. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just a ton of static. What are you going to advise the listeners out there who might not be able to fine tune their radio and all they get is static?
Right. I mean, you have to start looking under the hood at your own programming, and static is something that can be found, whether it's through Kim Kardashian or just looking around. I mean, going back to unlearning, it's the static is the stories, it's other people's stories and perceptions that we adopt along the way, that, we look around and see other people doing things, and it, if we're not doing enough, we feel like we're falling behind. And that can all be static. I open that with a great story about Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And he's one of my favorite historical figures.
With the glasses, and he couldn't see when he was shooting.
Yeah, exactly. He was out, a little boy, and he was out in the prairie with his friends, and they were all shooting rifles, and he was just watching as his friends were, like taking aim and watching these birds fly out of the sky when he couldn't even see them at all. And there's this moment in his biography that they talk about how the boys were reading letters from the sign, like off in the distance, and Theodore Roosevelt, he couldn't even see the words at all. And it wasn't that he couldn't read, right? So he gets his first pair of spectacles, and he writes in his journal that he was like, he had no idea that he wasn't even seeing. He was wholly ignorant to the fact that he couldn't see.
Right.
And that is so much of how people go through life, that they aren't even aware that they're not seeing the whole picture, because we collect static on our line, or we collect fog on the glasses. And it's something that's never really quite like a one and done. It's about reconnecting, clearing the static so you can hear the call that's meant for you. I talk about the hero's journey quite a bit in the book, and that every adventure starts off with this call to adventure,
right,
where the hero is knocked out of the ordinary world, and it's up to them to answer it. But when we have all this static, when we're too busy, when we've built a moat of tasks around like our true purpose, we can't even hear it. So we don't give ourselves a chance at being amazed, right? We don't give ourselves a chance at surprising ourselves. And there's a lot of lessons in the first half of the book that talk about how you can, clear the static. And it's all about reconnecting with, with other people, with yourself, the world,
nature,
stories, nature. I think that if I had to give one, like the most meaningful one, would probably be a journal practice. For me, that is something that I always amaze myself. It's like something that's like the most powerful and accessible things, and it's something that I consistently do for a while, and then I seem to like fall off.
Yeah.
It's like hard for me to like even keep a consistent practice.
Yeah, I'm the same way. But it is, the reason the journal, I'll just reflect, is so valuable is reflection. It allows you to go into the depths of your mind and then put something on paper. And then whether you read it and burn it, it doesn't matter. I used to burn my notes from the journal because some of the stuff that you reflect on, you're trying to move the energy through, right? There's energy there that's kind of blocking you up. And you state that false memories, okay, we're talking now about journaling, don't actually change the past, but the stories we tell ourselves do affect our present and future. The stories,
Mhm.
right? So when we journal, frequently we're writing the stories. We're talking about our beliefs
Mhm.
and our patterns and the things we do. Speak with us, if you would, about the cognitive reappraisal and how we can use this to change the story we're telling ourselves. Because, look, those actions, I should say, those patterns turn into beliefs, those beliefs turn into actions, and those actions then turn into stronger patterns and beliefs, and we have a hard time breaking them.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And so you have this thing called cognitive reappraisal. um, how would you advise these listeners about utilizing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can connect it back to journaling, because journaling, it's often thought of as the art of like collecting, and there is some truth to that. It's really nice to go back and revisit great moments, things you might have forgotten about. But when it comes to like clearing the static and really investigating the stories that you're telling yourself, it's the art of emptying. You're getting these things out of your head, and you'll be able to give yourself a difference between like past you and present you. And I think that the beautiful thing about the reappraisal when it comes to journaling is that you're giving yourself a chance to say, you're getting something out of your head, which is already a bad place to ruminate,
Right.
right? It's dark in there. It's like introspection in your head is like getting dressed in the dark. It's like you might get your pants on, but they're probably going to be on backwards and they're not going to match
Right.
your shoes.
Right.
You
Right.
need to get these things out of your head and into the journal, because what happens to me is I look at them and I say like, well, that's not even really true. That's what I was thinking in my head, and it might have sounded true because I wasn't able to get it out into the light and see it. And the cognitive reappraisal, it's what it is essentially, just to explain it. It's you're training yourself when you say, oh, this is going to be such a long week, this is going to be so stressful, to really just stop for a minute and say, okay, that, Brene Brown talks about this. She has a great line where, and this is really like the mic drop moment, is she has changed her language. So she says, the story I'm telling myself is,
Mm-hmm.
and just saying that kind of gives you an opportunity to say like, okay, like false memories don't change the past, as I write, but our perception of what's happening do affect our future. So just taking a moment to realize like what we're worried about like hasn't happened yet. This is still a story. There's still time to change the story. So a cognitive reappraisal would be taking that emotion, pausing and say, this is a story, like how can I turn this into a positive, or how can I just turn these feelings to something that's a little more neutral? And you know in the book I talk about, there's a lot of research out there that shows that being optimistic has a lot of benefits. So
Oh,
uh,
so true. I mean, it's everything in life, and I think one of those areas that you can tell yourself stories that can be really dangerous and is really around your health. You can actually reprogram. I just had Bernie Siegel on here, and then I've just been with Stephen Berman, who was a emergency room doctor for 20 years at Scripps Hospital. And it's not only the stories we tell ourselves, but it's the stories that somebody of authority may tell us or infer upon us about our health that we start to believe. The doctor
totally.
says, "Oh, you're going to die. Go home and die." Right? You've got
Hmm.
you got a year to live. And you look at all the people that refuted the story and lived another 20 years, right?
Totally.
And so the power of someone outside of ourselves plus ourselves believing that is so strong. And you mentioned in the book that the rate of mental illness and loneliness in our society is at increasing alarming rates. Maybe I said that. Maybe you didn't say it in the book. But that our work is more important than our social lives.
Hmm.
What are the dangers of this isolated life? Because look, with COVID, more isolation than ever. And how would you recommend people break free from their mental attachment of always putting work before connecting with others? And
Yeah.
that was in your book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big piece of the book. That's something that I had struggled with myself. And there's like a funny sentiment among millennials. I think I saw a meme for this that's like, getting older is just telling your friends how busy you are. We'll be sure to catch up soon until you die.
Yeah, I remember that in the book.
It's so easy to just kind of fall into that thinking. And I remember seeing that and just being like, oh my gosh, that's too true. Well, I think that our society, we kind of put chasing our dreams above all else, and we've really gotten better as a society at encouraging each other to kind of follow your dreams and work hard and like manifest your greatest reality. So I think it's kind of in a weird way almost become socially acceptable to say, I can't hang out because I'm focused on this. Like all the success stories that we hear, a lot of them are like, you know, I sacrificed for years and didn't see anybody, said no to going to parties, social events, and all that. And the problem with this is that it really does run right up against our human biology. There's a wonderful book by Sebastian Junger. It's called Tribe, and it's all about human connection and PTSD and a lot of really like beautiful topics. But he talks about how, it was really only 20,000 years ago or so that we were living in tribes where if you wanted to be an individual and have personal property and think for yourself and all that, these are all still really new concepts. Like the notion that you could go days without being around somebody else or worrying about somebody else and just be completely individualistic, that is something that our DNA and our biology hasn't had a chance to catch up to these differences in the world, where you can just go months and years with really just being all on your own. So there's like an actual biological, like emotional and physical regulation where we need other humans around us, right? And this chapter is written before COVID, of course, and I know that it's just that much harder. And I think that we can see in the numbers, the lockdowns, different people will argue about how necessary or unnecessary they are. However, the number of suicides and depression and domestic abuse, like these things are going up because we're not able to go and be connected to other humans.
Most definitely.
But the good news is, for listeners who are wondering how to up their human connection, is it doesn't actually take hours of dinner parties and long walks on the beach with thousands of friends. Like it just comes down to recognizing that you are part of a tribe, making small talk, holding the door open for someone, just smiling and just sending that signal to your brain that, hey, I'm a human, you're a human. I think that for me, what really led to aches and pains in my body and like that tunnel vision on work was that I felt like I was too busy for friends. And when I would hang out with them, I would feel guilty, like I should be working, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm out at the beach.
Yeah.
I'm just hanging out under the sun. I should be writing my book. I should be like doing these other things. I'm not being productive, right?
Right.
But what's true is that you are being productive because you're connecting with other human beings, and you maybe they're holding space for you so you can get things off your chest, which is very, very important. And then it's like we're interdependent beings, like it's not just about you, it's also about the society that you want to live in, the service that you want to give to others. And you never know like what calling a friend or doing a Zoom call with a friend just so you can listen to them talk and they can see the expression in your face and you can see the expression in theirs, like how much that really generates, creativity is a result of empathy. Like we need to be able to see how other people think and feel, and this goes into like being able to learn. And this is kind of like a long-winded answer of just saying like
also it's also creativity is also a result of connectivity.
Right, exactly.
We don't create alone. No man is an island kind of thing.
Totally.
We're not going to be able to do. Steve Jobs didn't do it alone. All these guys who've made fortunes doing what they're doing. There was a team, and those people come together, and because you've worked in this environment. But I love your story in the book about Colin O'Brady. I remember actually watching a little documentary about him, and the explorer trekked 1,000 miles over the Arctic in 54 days. Now, this is talking about isolation now, so we can really get to this, because now you go take a sled across the Arctic for 54 days by yourself, okay? And you've got some true isolation. You then state that there is one key difference between being physically alone and embracing the true power of solitude. So we're talking solitude, silence, okay? And it is an inch wide and runs a mile deep, and it's called silence. Yes. I've been to many silent retreats where I had to be silent for 3 days, okay? Speak with our listeners about the power of silence. And if you would, I added meditation in there because I would assume that you have some practice of meditation, yes. Knowing the kind of person that you are. So I threw that in for kicks, but I think silence and meditation go together.
Yeah, the silence can be deafening, as they say. It can be, this is one that most of the chapters, Greg, I really wrote for myself. I'm talking to myself most of these early drafts, and this is something that's hard for me. I think that, there's this notion that, alone time is really valuable. And of course it is, but as we have more podcasts, as we have more ways of listening, music, I make the point that how often are you really alone if you're just at home on your phone, looking at other people, listening to other people's voices and things like that. And while we do need the human connection to help and inspire, and we need each other, there's an Albert Camus quote that goes, "In order to understand the world, one must occasionally turn away from it." And to understand yourself, I really believe that you need to completely turn away from it, because when you're, the power of silence is that it's like this. If you're I'm a musician as well. So if you're in a music studio and you've got something in your head, like you've got a song or like a beat or something that you're trying to create, you need to be able to really listen and mix the boards, right? So we all have this internal dialogue. We all have these hopes and dreams and fears and worries that are like percolating under the surface in our head. And maybe we're facing them, maybe we're drowning them out, but you're going to get through those by like mixing them. You're going to be testing the levels, but you can't mix the song playing in your head if you've got someone else's greatest hits album going on in the background. It's just going to take you away from that. And it's something that I still find in myself, where if I'm doing the dishes or something, I'm like, I just want to put on a podcast. I don't want to deal with what's playing here. But that's just adding to the static on the line, even if what you're listening to is good. And I think that it's very important in this day and age where the world is louder than ever to really sit and just listen to see what's going on in here, like what's actually playing. Meditation is great for that. Meditation is great for so many things. I think, like in this context, connecting it to silence. If you're going to sit and meditate for 15 minutes, it's the act of observing. It's what's actually playing right now on this loop in my head, because it's not quiet in here. And I think before you can get it to be quiet in here, you need to be able to actually listen and observe what's happening in there. And I think that silence is the true canvas to to accomplish that.
Well, the thing that usually happens when people start, if somebody out there who's listening to my show isn't already a meditator, I'm really surprised. But it's the monkey mind, right? It's all the to-dos and the things, and I say do a mind dump, right? In other words, just put everything that's on your mind, write it all out on a piece of paper, stick it over there, because that can always happen later. And it's a good way to clear all that mind chatter that's going on that monkey mind. You tell a great story about Hawking, Lincoln, and CIA. I kind of paraphrased it from the book. All knew the danger of not having their personal beliefs challenged. We're coming back to belief now, because the reality is this is what sets the tone for all of us about whether we think we're productive or not, is the
Yes.
belief of
Mhm.
whether or not we're productive or not. You've got to question it, because you were just talking about it. It's like, hey, that phone call, well, that's productive. You were doing something productive. It's how you reframe it and how you look at it. Can you relay the stories and how this relates to having us update the beliefs that we could be misguiding or misguided about what we truly believe, and just to question those beliefs? Because I like the fact that, look, you're going to, in those stories, you're going to have somebody, actually, I think in Hawking's case, he paid somebody $100 to question a theory about, was it black hole? You
Yes.
tell the story. You go ahead and tell the story.
Absolutely. There's a great Hawking story about he made a bet. Well, there's two bets. So Hawking used to make these public wagers with other physicists about their theories. And this was really looked down upon, actually, because physicists, they rely on like funding. They're really only as good as they are right. They're
Right.
setting out to like prove things right. So when you have someone like Stephen Hawking, which is like, who's very famous, is publicly in rooms full of reporters saying like, I bet you $100 that's not real. Or he bet Peter Higgs that the Higgs boson would never be discovered. I think he bet him
Right.
a year of Penthouse magazines, right?
Right.
So
Right.
he's got this sense of humor about it, and the way the other physicists were like, "You're calling me out. You're making me look bad. I can't be wrong. That's going to mean losing respect and funding." But Hawking was really ready to be wrong, and I think that more than anything, he wanted to be proven wrong, because people that are in the situation where they're surrounded by, let's call them like yes men, like they know what they think, but they go out of their way to be proven wrong and to have other people around them that are going to disagree. You brought up Lincoln, like I do in the book as well, and he had his team of rivals where he filled his cabinet when he became president of the people that openly ridiculed him, openly ran against him, and he wanted to build a think tank of people who were really going to be willing to challenge him and like really force him to think. And this chapter, Greg, has probably become even more timely than ever, just in the world that we're living in right now, where the way that fact can be blurred into fiction and vice versa. There's actually just new technologies being invented every day to just like blur that line. And I think that when I wrote the chapter, my goal and call to action for myself and the reader was to really try and seek out those outside voices that are willing to change your mind, and to run towards them, right? Personal belief systems, we attach our beliefs to our identity, and that is just kind of like a bug of being human, right? When we believe something, we kind of make it part of our belief system. And the problem with doing that is that when you start questioning those beliefs, it becomes scary, because it's like, if you believe one thing and your identity is wrapped up in that, and then someone else is saying, well, you know what, you haven't thought this through, and I'm going to give you some more information that might crumble that belief. All of a sudden, it's like, you're not just attacking my belief, you're attacking like who I am, what I stand for. And it's very dangerous, especially in today's world where truth is just such a moving target. And what I was starting to say is that when I wrote the chapter, I think it was more of, running towards those voices that are willing to change your mind. And I still believe that, but I think more than ever, just seeing how hurtable people are in 2020 when it comes to information and group think, that it's really a call to action to think for yourself. And
you just have to be discerning, I think. I think that, and it's based on your ability to take in information and logically process the information. It's the best way I can put it. We're all going to stand at a different position, whether we believe it's fake news or it's not fake news, or it is what it is, because it's so blurred. Everything right now has this sense of urgency, and just a very high degree of complexity, because if the decision you make You're concerned that it could affect many things in the future, almost like a domino effect, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we see this happening all over. And I think this is a good place for us to kind of wrap up the interview. The book is filled with great stories that exemplify, how we can recapture our true nature and purpose. Because really, in the end, it's your values and your purpose that you stand on that'll help you make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
I even said during this election, are you going to vote with your conscience, or are you going to vote with your pocketbook?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So you kind of have a choice. I kind of coined that term, I think, but I think a lot of people will vote with their pocketbook, and hopefully a lot more will vote with their conscience. And if those values and purpose are there, then they'll make the right decision. So what advice would you like to leave the listeners with regarding trapping into productivity and that we're not robots? Right? In other words, we can get trapped into productivity, and we can maybe believe or not believe we're robots, but there's many times we can feel that we're like we're robot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, okay, day I got to wake up, I got to do a podcast, I got to go meet somebody, I got to do this, and there's these robotic elements. There's this tasks kind of elements associated with it, but then there's the glimpses in between of what is the true nature, right? And so what would you advise people to kind of stay in that true nature, or at least see more glimpses of true nature?
I would say do the things that give you energy. Do more of the things that give you energy and less of the things that take energy. Because when you're doing things that are in alignment with your core values,
Mm-hmm.
with service to others, when you're really doing the things that only you are meant to do, something comes alive inside of you, and you will feel that energy, and it'll all make sense. And you'll be able to start to see the things that are actually taking you away from that and that are just like draining you.
That's great advice, and I think even I write about that in my book, Energy. And I think what happens is, for anybody, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're a housewife, or you're a whatever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, energy management is very, very key, right? It's the key to you being able to sustain not the output, but sustain your life values, and to be make a contribution, because we're all here to make a contribution to the world. And I think your book is a great contribution to the world, by the way. So I want to put another mention in here. Go to the website, Corey McComb, that's CoryMcComb.com. Stories to keep you human. Connect, get creative, and stay human in this new world, which it is a new world. Go there and look at the newsletter, the blog, and you'll be able to go to Amazon and our links in this podcast to purchase the book. I highly recommend it. I have what's called a pre-version of the book, the advanced editor's version of the book, and this is a phenomenal book. But Corey, thanks so much for being on. Thanks for being the kind of person to take the courage to write about it, and it does. The one who took the courage to actually step out from being that person on that treadmill and say, hey, I want to step off and I want to look at the world in a different way. And we need more people like you. So I just want to thank you for doing that. And thank you for getting the message out. And thank you for speaking to our audience as well.
Thanks so much, Greg. It was a pleasure.
Hey, namaste to you.
Share the book.
You
All
take
right.
care.
Take care. Bye.